Jai Hind friends, welcome to Dawla Education Group by Major Bharat. So today we are going to discuss about Prime Minister Modi's visit to Sri Lanka. That happened on April 4th, 5th and 6th. It was a 3-day visit. So we will look into the importance and significance of this visit on the point of view of for the economic as well as for the security. So let's start. Before going into the PPT and the presentation, I would like to tell a few words like Sri Lanka is in our south and it's an island nation and very much important for India for the security as well as for the economic point of view. So before going into, we will go into a brief background of the situation that what all happened in Sri Lanka in the last days. So there was a financial crisis that in 2022 Sri Lanka faced a major economic crisis triggered by heavy debt, inflation, low foreign reserves, fuel shortages, last but not least the wrong policies of the government, which were ultimately led to the outrage by the citizens who came into roads because they were very much affected. And President Gotabaya Rajapaksa had to resign. The second point is China's involvement. So China is not directly connected or concerned with the Indian Ocean region and the countries situated around. But it is very much defined that about 70 to 80% of China's trade passes through Indian Ocean region. So it is well concern of the China to take care of its policies and expand or influence the nations which are near about the Indian Ocean region. So China, in order to pursue its policy of string of pearls. So string of pearls is a policy. In Hindi we call it motiyon ki mala. Means China has been designing its policies in such a way that it is triggering India's national interest by getting some bases, naval bases around India in the Indian Ocean region, like one in Myanmar, Bangladesh, then Sri Lanka, then Pakistan, as well as the Maldives. So it is encircling India by acquiring some sort of islands and ports there. So that is string of pearls policy to contain India and has been actively injured in island nations. So मैंने बताया those who are having sea boundaries in the Indian Ocean region, China is actively engaged with them to influence them and get them into their trap, right? So to make them military and economic basis, for example, Hambantota, that is in Sri Lanka, right? Then comes the number 3. Number 3 in the background is Indian efforts. That there was a economic crisis in Sri Lanka. So what efforts India made to get the things on track, right? So India provided $4 billion. So when the crisis happened, India as a good neighbor provided aid to the Sri Lanka for $4 billion in 2022 and an additional $780 million grant for supporting its economic recovery, right? And India also has 2 major policies which Sri Lanka has to share in its domain. The first is neighborhood first policy, means for any sort of task, any sort of policies or assistance, any sort of interest, India's interests are connected to the neighbors first. So we are going to prioritize our neighbors in all our policies. So their interests are primary concerns. So that is the neighborhood first policy. Then is Sagar. So mission security and growth for all in the region. That is also a policy of India. The big picture number 4. This is a big picture. This is the crux of the story. That there have been facets of the situation where Sri Lanka wants to improve its situation by all means. What type of situation? It has been under, like if we go into history, it had LTT problem, there was an insurgency problem. Thereafter, it as we 2022 we learnt about economic crisis. So such type of internal problems had damaged and made the way difficult for Sri Lanka. So it has been, the situation is that Sri Lanka wants to improve its situation by all means. China wants to use this opportunity to create space for its policies. So whenever there is a needy and China coming to help it and influencing Sri Lanka for making space for its own national interests. In simple terms, China gives assistance, economic assistance to the countries who have been into economic some kind of drawbacks. So it provides money to them, and money leke, paisa leke, it takes some land, it encroaches the land or some kind of ports. That is Hermantotta is the example of such a port. China wants to use this opportunity by providing them money because they are suffering economically and they had to accept the money. And China gets its upper hand to fulfill and to get the work done for its national interest in the Indian Ocean region. Then comes the Indian angle. India is a neighbor, big neighbor of Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka's condition directly or indirectly affects India's situation. Like if there are any type of economic drawbacks or crisis in Sri Lanka, it also affects India. If there is any involvement of China which is supporting or having any basis in the Sri Lanka, it also affects India's security. So for Indian side, India wants Sri Lanka to remain autonomous. What do you mean by autonomous? Means not having favor of neither India nor China. If not totally win India, at least stay neutral, not providing any assistance, further assistance, or any type of priority to China. So now we will look into the matter. Why it is in the news? What's new? PM Narendra Modi visited Sri Lanka. He was on Sri Lanka for a 3-day visit on 4th, 5th and 6th of April, right? और जो नया प्रेसिडेंट बना है श्रीलंका में, Arup Kumar, right? He held the office in September 2024. So it is a great time for recovery of Sri Lanka, and he is hosting the first global leader since the start of his tenure. इसका मतलब क्या है कि जब उन्होंने अपना टेन्योर शुरू किया सितंबर 2024 में, Prime Minister Modi is the first global leader that he is hosting. Right? Key aspects of the visits: security, as we talk about, energy, healthcare, digitalization, further economic assistance to Sri Lanka. Let's talk about it one by one. Security means security of the region, security of the Indian Ocean region, security of the interest of India. Energy sector and healthcare. Then comes the digitalization. Means India is having an upper hand in digitalization. Digital Bharat, Digital India, we started in 2010s. और क्या हुआ वहां पे? What happened there? There were total 7 MOUs. MOU stand for memorandum of understanding, right? Including defense cooperation to cooperate. Both the countries will cooperate on defense point of views. Power import and export means energy production. Some energy sector we are growing in India, like oil and other, and some energy sectors Sri Lanka is having edge with. So we both will engage in economic activities like import and export of the energy also. Then digitalization, multi-sector grant assistance to Eastern Province, health and medical and pharma. Pharma में दवाइयों से related. Security concerns. This is the major area. This is the crux of the story. How? Sri Lanka to develop a small arms facility with Indian assistance. Small arms are those which can be carried by a human being or a foot soldier, right? For example, like AK-203, India has AK-47. These are some small arms examples. So with the help of India, Sri Lanka is going to develop small arm facility. Method, they are going to manufacture the small arms in their own country. This is first. Then second, security concern, China. Now the Prime Minister was on the visit and Sri Lankan President has reassured India that Sri Lanka's commitment to not allowing its territory to be used in any manner that could threaten India's security or regional stability, right? So they are saying that we will not allow any sort of threat, any sort of disinterest of the Indian diaspora as well as for the Indian Ocean region. Let's take some examples. These are some examples in the histories. Like in Sri Lanka had denied entry to submarine, which was China-based submarine in 2017. Denial to Chinese research vessels in January 2024. So let's be pretty clear. These research vessels are not just for research. They also conduct some type of intelligence gathering, surveillance and reconnaissance, that we call it ISR. Intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance means they try to gather information about India, about the depth of the water, about the deployment of submarines, etc., right? They also about missile test. Whenever there is any such missile test which India is going to conduct, so China sends its research vessels to do research, to gather intelligence about India's missile capabilities and etc. So it had denied, but ये deny के थे examples. Sri Lanka had denied permission to Chinese vessels in 2017-2024, but allowed in October 2023, August 2022. मतलब there is a dual standard of Sri Lanka involved. कभी वो allow कर देता है चाइना को अपने रिसर्च वेसल्स या फिर नेवल वेसल्स को अपने पोर्ट्स वगैरह पे, and sometimes it denies permission to them. There have been serious concern from India. Why India? Because India's national security comes under threat, serious threat, when such type of ports or vessels comes to the Indian Ocean region. And the US also has pointed out in January 2024, and it imposed a ban. Sri Lanka had imposed a ban on the entry of foreign ships to Sri Lankan ports in January 2024. But after 3-4 months, in July 2024, the Sri Lanka made a statement to lift its ban. Just after a period of 3 to 4 months, it lifted up the ban which they had done, right? Citing non-involvement in India-China rivalry. So this is important. They are saying that we will not target or we will not let our policies changed for India's interest. But we will see both India and China as our partners. Then the third thing comes fishery rights. So this is also very important, because if you look at India and its south is Sri Lanka. So in this region there are lots of good fisheries, fishes which are found, right? The long-standing fisherman issue, because when we go to land we can demarcate the boundaries, but in case of seas, in case of waters, we cannot do such things. So sometimes what happen is Indian fishermen cross their boundaries and go to Sri Lankan boundaries, right? And sometimes the vice versa. Sometimes Sri Lankan fishermen also come to Indian waters. So whenever these things happen, there are arrests which are being made. There are some actions which all countries, including India as well as Sri Lanka, takes place, right? So the both countries agreed to adopt the humanitarian approach. Matlab, they are just trying to fill their bellies. They are just trying to get some earnings. There is no security, or the nation's security getting hazardous because of it, right? PM Modi stressed the need for the quick release of detained fishermen and the return of their boats. मतलब श्रीलंका में जब हम गए, जब हमारे प्राइम मिनिस्टर नरेंद्र मोदी गए, so he asked the Sri Lankan government to release those fishermen and return their boats. Then comes the Sri Lankan president requested Prime Minister Modi assistant in initiating and bilateral technical discussions. Matlab bilateral means India and Sri Lanka both are discussing something regarding Sri Lanka's submission to UN Commission on Limits of the Continental Shelf for the extension of maritime boundaries beyond its exclusive economic zone, EEZ. EEZ is about 200 nautical miles from a country, right? So 200 nautical miles, every country has its security, all rights, all sort of rights it can pursue. And whenever a country has to enter another country's EEZ, it has to take permissions, right? So out of that, it's international waters. Anybody can come there, anybody can pursue any type of research, can get any type of encroachment or whatever their will is. So that is also another important factor that we are going to discuss. E2. E2 means energy and economic sector. So at the time of meeting between both the leaders in December 2024, the plans were to supply liquefied natural gas to Sri Lanka and also help to link its power grids. Power grids for energy sector, electricity, right? Plans to develop a regional energy and industrial hub at this place and Samarapur solar power plant. So we have named a solar power plant that we have inaugurated in Sri Lanka. At the same place, a joint venture in oil refinery to facilitate exports along with UAE. तो oil refinery भी हमने वहां पे at the same place we have opened for facilitating oil refinery along with the help of UAE. It will be giving tough competition to China-based energy firm Sinopec. So there is already China's presence in this area, and India is trying to give them a tough competition. And Sinopec is building a 3.2 billion oil refinery in Sri Lanka's Hambantota. Hambantota, as we earlier discussed, this is a port, right? Indian Oil Corporation is the second biggest oil supplier to Sri Lanka after its own Ceylon Petroleum Corporation. So when it comes to oil sector, energy sector, India's Indian Oil Corporation is having a major stake and contribution to Sri Lanka's interest. So it also had the part of inauguration of 120 megawatt solar power plant, a joint effort by Ceylon Electricity Board and India's National Thermal Power Corporation. So there is also an inauguration of 120 megawatt solar power project. Next comes a financial grant of 300 crore rupees to implement Sri Lanka's unique digital identity project UPI. So it is part of, as we discussed, digitalization. So India is the major contributor of the UPI. So whenever there is a transaction involved in everybody's life, we majorly have shifted towards the online payments using the UPI. So we are the boss of this thing. We are the expert. So UPI project, India is investing about 300 crores rupees. Next comes the, as per PM Modi, India will develop approximate 2.4 billion Sri Lanka rupees for development of the eastern province. So if you look at Sri Lanka's map, these are some 3 districts that India is going to help them to develop those eastern provinces. The way forward. It is a very important thing. What is going to happen in the coming time for India? What are the challenges for India first of all? These challenges are, first of all, the security point of view. The first challenge, the security of our interest. The second comes the economic security. It needs to secure its interest in Indian Ocean region, that any threat in this region would pave difficulties for it. What does it mean? If any sort of threat is coming in Indian Ocean region, so it is going to determine and affect India's national interest and objectives. So the second number is, there is direct competition between India and its giant enemy China. So whenever China has very open eyes, open brain. It sees, it seeks, it absorbs the opportunities that are available in the domains. Like Sri Lanka had an economic crisis. So economic crisis को कैसे खत्म कर सकते हैं? By providing them economic help. So if you are fulfilling the economic help of someone, so in return you will also dictate your terms. So India is also providing economic help to Sri Lanka, and China is also. So it leads to the competition in the region. Sri Lanka is also in dilemma that whose interest should Sri Lanka pursue. The later one is more capable in fueling money, because China is a major power, global power. So it can give, it can donate, or it can fuel more money to Sri Lanka than India. It is just a normal and logical thing, which keep on doing so. India needs to take proactive measures and secure its interest by hook or crook. मतलब क्या है? We have to give China a tough competition. We have to reassure Sri Lanka that its interest lies more than us, more with us, and there is not that Sri Lanka alone can develop and China is sitting there. So India will also get hampered, and with India's progress or disgrace, Sri Lanka gets a lot of impact. It needs to play a greater role, whether it's through economy, diplomacy, or both. Diplomacy means We are having dialogues with Sri Lanka. We are convincing Sri Lanka that our interests are also going to affect yours, and if you lie with us, if you stay with us, then we are surely going to help you out in this difficult times. Additionally, it needs to keep the flag of neighborhood first policy and sagar high. We have to keep on pursuing, keep on raising the flag higher for ensuring the implementation of these policies. For Sri Lanka, Lanka has understood by large that India is a reliable partner. So let's check the reliability. India always stood by Sri Lanka, whether it is any type of internal insurgency program like in 1987 Operation Pawan. So India had sent its forces at the time of emergency situation in Sri Lanka. So there was a force, insurgent force, which was throwing the government and forces out, killing them brutally. So India sent Indian peacekeeping force, IPKF, right? Indian peacekeeping force in Sri Lanka, and we defended the country for 3 years. 87 to 90 we stayed there, and we can keep on fighting for Litte. Then comes the reliability of China. China might be supplying, giving more help in terms of quantitative, but not the qualitative. What I mean is that China may be providing more money to Sri Lanka, but in return, it also bargained the Sri Lanka's interest and India's interest to go into vain. It asked for ports if you are not able to pay the return of the money that China had paid. So it asks you to mold your or compromise your policies for its own sake. So whether India is more reliable or China, then answer is India. Sri Lanka knows it. It is trying to come out of the political, economic and all sort of disturbances. Like it has been struggling with economic crisis. It has been struggling with political crisis, which even led by the economic crisis. So, but the decision of choosing the rope of help means you are, let's take an example, you are in a mud and you are trapped in a mud or in a well, and there are two ropes holding, one held by China, one held by India. So you have to choose the right rope which will bring you out of that disaster. So Sri Lanka has understood that the right rope is of India, right? So choosing the right rope to be made wisely. And in coming time, Sri Lanka is likely to remain a reliable partner to India and ensure mutual growth and no entry to outsiders. This is a major and the conclusion of this thing, that Sri Lanka is going to be a reliable partner for India. Sri Lanka is going to ensure the fulfillment of India's national interest, and India's national interest remains with open and inclusive Indian Ocean region and no entry to countries like China, which deals with encroachment, several types of security threats, as well as intelligence gathering against Indian forces as well as Indian objectives, right? So this was our India-Sri Lanka basic relations, as well as the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi 3-day visit. So in this we have discussed that Indian Prime Minister visited Sri Lanka for 3 days, 4th, 5th and 6th of April, and Sri Lanka also got a new president in September 2024. We also discussed the background of this situation, like what are the complications, what type of threats or what kind of condition the Sri Lanka is going through, like economic crisis. Then comes the India's interest towards it and China's involvement. Then we discussed about like India's help to China, right? And the way forward. So thank you so much for watching, and you may come because we have started our National Defense Academy written batch at the Dala Education Group by Major Bharat, and you may also like to visit us. That is at Shilla Bypass. Thank you.